So I'm not going to do a traditional intro because I feel like that would be in really poor taste, obviously. Um, if you don't know, my name is Harley Nouveau. I've been on YouTube for about a year now, and I had really wanted to make this kind of video, but I had always struggled with planning it out ahead of time because it wasn't something that I really wanted to do on the fly. I wanted to put a lot more thought into it. However, I think that is a bit misguided on my part because I have a friend, I'm not going to name names because that would be inappropriate, who is really struggling right now, and I don't know if this could help her or if this could help any of you out there who are struggling, but in the event that it does, I think that it would be better to share this story, share these thoughts now, as opposed to waiting for an opportune time. As you can tell from the title of this video, I do consider myself a survivor of suicide in a couple different ways. First and foremost, I personally have struggled with suicidal thoughts and ideation for about 15 years now. Some backstory on myself. I grew up in a really conservative area. I was the only openly gay person that I knew of at the time. I was always very flamboyant, and I was always myself without fail. I didn't see the point in hiding who I was, and I didn't think that I had the ability to hide who I was, so it seemed a waste of energy to try. But because of that, I was met with a lot of aggression and backlash, which aggravated a problem that I had and not realized for years, and that is I suffer from manic depression. I have been diagnosed it, and I self-diagnosed it. I used to take medication for it. I do not anymore because of financial reasons. Essentially, in a really simplified term, I have depression, I have depressive episodes, and the manic comes in because in a way it's similar to bipolar disorder in that there's a lot of instability in my emotional spectrum. It's characterized by really high highs, very low lows, seemingly not like in the movies where it's just a flip of a switch and my mood changes, but something very minor can trigger one of these episodes, and they can come seemingly out of nowhere. And when I say that they get low, I mean, this is something I joke about because I have a dark sense of humor, but my most intense episode of which I came the closest to suicide in recent memory was actually last December before I started my channel. And what triggered it was I was baking Christmas cookies. I messed up like 3 different batches. And I was going through a lot at the time, but failing at something so minute and simple just sent me spiraling on a path of self-destruction. And it sounds silly to somebody who doesn't understand what it means to struggle with the weight of this kind of disorder, that cookies almost cost me my life, but they did. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Essentially, I have struggled with the desire to kill myself since I was 11 years old. I also am a victim of sexual and physical abuse from a very early age that played a big part in my mental health and lack thereof, and compounded with all of these other issues to create kind of this cocktail of self-destruction, if you will. I have made multiple attempts, and I have been unsuccessful in all of them. You could argue that subconsciously that was me stopping myself from going through with something I knew I didn't want to do. I see it more as the desire to be free blinded me from being able to really carry out what I wanted, because I wanted it so badly that I didn't really think about if what I was doing was going to work, if that makes any sense. I to this day still struggle with that. And the other side is, not only am I somebody who is a survivor of my own failed suicide attempts, but I am a survivor of people that I know successfully committing suicide. When I was 17, my stepfather hung himself on my birthday. Obviously, he did not make it. And it didn't really affect me as much as it profoundly affected my mother and the people around me. And he wasn't the first and he wasn't the last to kill themselves in my life. And watching the damage that has taken onto other people has given me a little bit of insight. None of that is coming from a place of shame, because I think that as a society, we fail when it comes to the way that we approach mental health across the board. There's this idea of guilt tripping, in a way, people who struggle with suicidal thoughts or depression or mental illness, using the people that they love and the repercussions of their actions as a weapon. You know, what would your family think? What would your friends think? Who would you leave behind? And ultimately, at the end of the day, none of that matters. As somebody who struggles with that myself, when you are in the deepest darkness, you don't think about other people for the most part. And something I learned from growing up a family of addicts, especially when you struggle with mental health, that has to be your number one priority, because if that is not correct, everything else across the board is unable to be correct. So even though obviously you love your family and you care about your loved ones, you don't really think about that. And that's not going to stop you from not getting better. That's not going to make you better. You can't love somebody better. I know that they say like love heals everything, and in a romanticized world, we want to believe that that's true, but that's not the case. You can't fix somebody through love. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor, so I don't take anything that I'm saying as medical fact. These are just my perspectives as somebody who has been fighting this fight and lived through this fight. At this point in my life, I don't actively seek to harm myself. It's more of this idea that I have become a bystander and watching my life go by. I frequently wake up and am disappointed that I've done so. I go to bed and I think a lot about how at peace I would be if I didn't wake up again. Or I wake up in the morning and I think about how hard it is that I had to wake up again. I struggled to pull myself out of bed a lot of days, and it's not so much an active desire to end my life for me, and I think for a lot of people, as it is a desire for it just not to be there anymore. I don't want to actively make it go away. I just want it to stop. And the thing about a storm or a mountain is whenever you get through it or you get to the other side, you look back and you think like that wasn't that hard to overcome. But when you were in it, you lose perspective of the future. You lose the ability to see that the storm will pass, that eventually the mountain will start declining. And all you can think about in that moment is the pain and the emptiness and the hurt and the suffering. And I get that, you know, I understand that, because that's something I too struggle to keep sight of. And I think that there is this misguided attempt from people who can't relate or don't understand what it's like to go through, where they tell you to just keep smiling, just keep pushing through it. You have to just fake it till you make it, in a sense. But the problem with that, to me, and why I think that that is a harmful advice to give to people, is that when you are faking it, you don't ever make it, because you're not actually healing, you're not actually growing, you're not really addressing and giving attention to the issues that are causing this pain in the first place. You are just trying to ignore it by putting on a good face and acting like it's not there in hopes that it goes away. And if there's one thing I've learned through all my years and experiences, is that no matter where you run and no matter where you go, you're always going to be there. You can't hide from that. You can't ignore that in hopes that it disappears. You are always with you, the good and the bad. And another thing that I feel helps aggravate the issue is the sense of condescension and patronization from people who don't understand the struggle. You know, why are you like this? You don't have any reason to feel this way. You're being over dramatic. Just get past it, you know, just get over it. But I can't get over this any more than a person who is drowning can suddenly start swimming, or any more than a person who is on fire can just wish the flames to disappear. That's not how it works. And there's this voice in the back of your head that feeds into this darkness inside of you. And when you hear feedback like that, all it does is reinforce those negative emotions you already have. You convince yourself that you're unworthy. You convince yourself that you're unloved and that it's not ever going to get better. And when people say things like that, when people undermine your feelings, or when people, what's the word I'm looking for? Invalidate your suffering, all it does is make you think that you are right in that darkness. One of the things that I feel like people don't understand, or maybe they don't realize, both victims and bystanders, is the idea of longing for death. For a lot of us, for most of us, I would argue, it's not that we want to die. It's not that I want to die. I don't. I may not necessarily want to live, but I don't want to die. I want to be free. And in my mind, and in a lot of other victims' minds, they equate death with freedom, because you don't have to feel the pain when there's no pain to feel. And I get it, you know. I tell myself that a lot. If I'm not here tomorrow, I don't have to feel this way tomorrow. And if death is what it takes, it's what it takes. And I find myself wishing that that isn't the way that it is. And I feel like deep down I know that that's not how it is. But sometimes that monster who is in the room with you gets to you. And one of the things that I've always struggled with when it comes to getting help is, with depression and suicidal thoughts, there also comes a sense of lethargy and a lack of motivation. And you can look this up. There are studies that support this. It is not uncommon, and why they put the warning on a lot of medications, for people who struggle with suicidal thoughts to not follow through with them until they start getting better, because suddenly they have that extra push that they needed. Not that I'm trying to tell anyone not to get help, because you need help. This is not a fight that anybody can win on their own. But for me, there's this idea of the devil you know versus the devil you don't. I'm trapped in this room with this monster, and I don't want to be here with it. I'm scared of it and it hurts me, but what if on the other side of the door leading out of this room, there's a bigger monster, or there's a worse monster, or there's more pain and more suffering? So for a long time, that prevented me from dealing with my issues, because I know how to keep afloat right now. I may not think that I will be able to keep it up forever, and frequently I don't. I often tell myself, like, if life does not get better, what's the point in making it? What's the point in going forward? But I know that I'm able to sustain myself in the way that I am now. Why take a risk by swimming out another 3 feet? And for me, I wish that I could sit here and tell you the reason that I have not killed myself is because I worry about who I left behind and how much they'll miss me, and this, that, or the other cookie cutter excuse or logic or justification people give. But that would be a lie, because I don't care. For me, what stops me every time, I think, from really going through with it, and what has caused me to self-sabotage, is the small things like the what if. There is a high likelihood that tomorrow is not going to be any better than today, that I'm going to continue suffering for a long time to come. And if you had told me at 16 that 10 years later I would still be trapped in this perpetual state of quicksand, trying to hold myself up, trying to keep myself being able to breathe, I probably would have just ended it there, because what has kept me going through all of this time is, yes, tomorrow may be worse. It may not be any better. The storm may not end in the foreseeable future. But what if it does? Realistically speaking, there has to be an end somewhere, doesn't there? And I can't give up now knowing that I can't give up now with the possibility that tomorrow could have been the day it turned around for me, or if not, then the day after. If I stop before the sun rises, I'm missing out on so many things, and I can give up now. I can allow this ocean to swallow me, and I'll be free of the pain and the suffering and the hatred and the emptiness. But I'm also free of the good things. No matter how minute they are, whether it be 60 seconds today that I had a genuine laugh, or I genuinely felt better, or I had love for myself, or I loved somebody else. Those little moments are what give meaning to all of this suffering for me. And I can't personally give up no matter how little those moments are in retrospect, I'm not willing to trade that for being free from that. I have suffered for so long, but through the years, I've also had so many great things happen to me, and maybe it didn't make the rest of it okay, but I didn't have one without the other. I can't speak to if I would have. And I think that people suffer with this idea of being alone. You know, nobody knows what's going on inside your head but you. Nobody knows how dark and terrifying and overwhelming these feelings are. And because of that, nobody is able to understand. But there's a difference between being alone in here and being alone out there. You know, I may be the only person who is able to fight off the darkness in me, but that doesn't mean that I actually am doing it by myself. I have so many other people, directly and indirectly, that have made an impact on who I am, that have left pieces for me to carry with me throughout this entire journey. And while they can't take the pain away for me, they can help give me the tools and the strength that I need to fight off the pain a little bit longer. The sea of life, as I've said before, is a very treacherous one, and it's unyielding and unforgiving, but we're all swimming in it together. And even in your darkest moments, when you feel like you're alone and you feel like you can't keep going on, you may not see that there's anyone else around you, but just reach out and you'll feel somebody there. And that's all I really have to say about all of that. I can't promise you that there's going to be a brighter day ahead, but there just might be. And I know that I want to see it if it's there. And I think that you do too. If you or a loved one that you know is struggling with mental health, mental illness, depression, suicidal thoughts, it's okay to need help, and it's okay to get help. So I'm going to leave some information down below for some websites and some phone numbers that you can contact or you can give to somebody, because no matter how dark the night gets, sometimes all you need to get through is just that little bit of light. So just know that you're not alone. So as always, I am Harley Nouveau, and until our stars next align, take care of yourself and take care of those around you, because there are some people who came into this world who are meant to be stars, and there are some of us who are born to shine but can't do it by ourselves.